Hey guys, tonight we begin with the lives of Egyptian concubines, women who shared a king's bed, waited years for a glance, and learned how to flirt and avoid poison at the same time. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is. It's always fascinating to see who's listening from across time zones and possibly curled up under a blanket with tea. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The sun rises gently over the Nile, birds chirp, the palace stirs, and just as your dream is reaching its most dramatic moment, probably something involving a shirtless scribe and unlimited figs, you're awakened by the soft whisper of a servant telling you with alarming cheerfulness that you look a bit puffy this morning. Welcome to your life as a royal Egyptian concubine. You do not sleep in. The pharaoh might not visit today. In fact, he might not visit ever. But that doesn't matter. You're a state asset, a living ornament, and your body clock now belongs to the department of looking good before breakfast. You're lifted out of your linen sheets, scratchy but fashionable, and immediately handed a bronze mirror. This is not a gesture of kindness. It's a diagnostic tool. How's your complexion? Any eyebrow hairs gone rogue? Have your lips lost their lotus petal sheen? These questions are not rhetorical. Your entire future might hinge on whether or not your face looks slightly more radiant than the girl snoring next to you. Next comes stretching, not for fitness, but for posture. A crooked back means bad profile angles, and bad angles mean you're stuck in the maybe later pile for eternity. You spend 10 minutes walking back and forth, balancing a bowl of scented water on your head while pretending you're happy about it. Breakfast arrives. A platter of dates, figs, and possibly a single pomegranate seed that someone cut in half to encourage portion control. You eat slowly because nothing ruins a lure like chewing. Across the room, other concubines do the same, each trying to look casual while also performing a silent, exhaustive competition called Who Blinks Least While Making Eye Contact with No One. The servant returns. She suggests a cool compress for your under eyes, which is code for you look like someone just told you the pharaoh prefers harpists. You comply. The cloth smells of lavender and ambition, and so the day begins. Not with grandeur, not with glory, but with an endless parade of tiny, effortful rituals designed to make you appear effortlessly divine. You haven't spoken a word yet. You haven't left the room, but you've already fought your first battle, waking up and looking like you haven't aged in the last 12 hours. Spoiler, you'll have to do it again tomorrow. Bath time as a concubine is not about hygiene. It's about transformation. You're not just a woman with sleep crust in her eye. You're a vessel of royal potential, and apparently that vessel needs to be soaked, scrubbed, shaved, and basted like a sacred goose before it's considered presentable. You're led to the bathing chamber, which smells like a perfumery collided with a citrus orchard. The water has been steeped with lotus petals, jasmine oil, and something labelled fragrance of divine intention. It's less of a bath and more of a scented baptism. You're not just rinsing, you're entering the morning's first performance. 2 attendants approach with sponges that are both gentle and oddly judgmental. You're scrubbed with ground natron, a salty mineral powder that exfoliates dead skin, shame, and any remaining memories of village life. Every inch of you is polished like a ceremonial offering. Then comes the hair removal, Every strand below the eyebrows must vanish. Waxing, plucking or shaving, choose your torment. Body hair is seen as unsightly, unsanitary, and worst of all, common. You grit your teeth as the wax cloth is yanked and remind yourself queens don't complain. They hiss politely. After that, thick, rich almond oil is poured over you by someone who speaks only in compliments. You're massaged until your skin gleams and you slip slightly on the floor trying to stand. You've become a human candle. And now the perfume. It's not spritzed, it's layered. First a musky base oil, then a citrus middle note, then a floral top. You smell like a deity or a fruit basket attending a wedding. This scent will cling to you all day, which is the goal. If you pass by the pharaoh and he sneezes, that's not allergies, it's a tactical victory. Finally, you're handed a clean linen shift, semi-transparent naturally, and gently reminded to sit upright for the next hour so the oils can settle with grace. Translation: don't ruin the shine. You're now clean, not because you were dirty, but because expectation demands it. You've completed your ritual. After your ceremonial bath, you enter the next phase of the morning, the assembly of your face. Forget inner beauty. You'll need to earn divine favour with outer cheekbone symmetry and eyeliner so sharp it could be considered a military asset. You're seated in front of a polished bronze mirror, the ancient Egyptian version of a beauty influencer's ring light. A cosmetics attendant approaches, carrying what looks like a miniature painter's kit. Powdered galena, red ochre, and crushed carmine beetles. You're about to become a living fresco. First, eyeliner. Black coal is applied with the same seriousness one would expect from a priest handling sacred scrolls. The line must be precise, not too thick, unless you want to look like you're auditioning to be embalmed, and not too thin, lest someone mistake you for a scribe's intern. It's a delicate balance between mystery and menace. You're told to hold still, which is helpful advice if you weren't currently being poked in the eyeball with a reed stick. One tear and the whole thing smudges. Then you'll look weary, and weary women don't get summoned by pharaohs. They get reassigned to linen folding duty. Next comes the lip colour. Red ochre mixed with animal fat because nothing says romance like beetle paste chapstick. Your lips must look plump yet humble, which is apparently a real instruction. You try not to overthink it. Then blush, a light dusting across the cheeks to imply youthful vitality. Even though you haven't had a proper night's sleep since the last flood season, high-status fatigue must be masked. You're not allowed to look tired, only pensive. A slave girl steps forward with an eyebrow comb from ivory. Eyebrows are shaped to reflect dignity, fertility, and possibly political allegiance. No one's quite sure anymore. You nod in approval, as if you understand the eyebrow hierarchy. Last comes perfume, again, this time applied behind your ears and on your wrists, because that's where the pharaoh might someday make casual contact, assuming he's bored enough to drop by. You're now beautiful, polished, and possibly flammable. You glance at yourself in the mirror. You look like someone who belongs in a tomb mural, offering lotus flowers to a god. All you need now is a god who's hiring. Once you've been bathed, buffed, oiled, shaved, painted, perfumed, and told you're glowing, but not as much as yesterday, it's time for breakfast. The haram dining hall isn't exactly a bustling mess. It's more like a fashion runway where everyone sits down. Dozens of women gather, dressed in semi-sheer linen that whispers, approachable but ambitious. They glide toward their low tables with the precision of a crocodile stalking a heron, silent, slow, and absolutely sizing each other up. Your meal is elegantly minimal. A small plate of honeyed dates, 2 figs, and a dab of yogurt. Not enough to feed hunger, but just enough to maintain cheekbone structure. You eat gracefully with 3 fingers only because apparently forks are still 1,000 years in the future and gluttony is for widows and scribes. And this is where the passive aggression begins. Oh, your call is so bold today. Someone coos from across the table, smiling with every tooth except her eyes. You thank her politely, while mentally noting that her eyeliner is crooked and her earlobes are uneven. A younger concubine accidentally sits beside you, then loudly mentions how she was up all night practicing harp in case the pharaoh was feeling musical. Translation: she thinks tonight might be her night. You smile, chew slowly, and let a single fig seed sit dramatically on your lip like a statement of war. Conversations swirl around you. Gossip about who cried in the baths, who borrowed whose perfume without asking, and who was seen leaving the astrologer's quarters looking hopeful. Everyone's pretending to be unbothered. No one actually is. You make sure not to eat too fast. Women who finish quickly are greedy, and women who don't eat at all are trying too hard. You strike the middle ground. Casual elegance with the side of strategic chewing. Servants refill cups of palm wine, but only a splash. Too much, and someone might tell the wrong story to the right person. Breakfast ends with a ceremonial brushing of teeth using a chewed twig and a bit of natron. You smile into your bronze mirror and think, one more meal survived. One more war disguised as brunch. After breakfast, you'd think it might be time to relax, maybe take a nap, maybe do something productive. But no, you're now entering the most exhausting phase of your day, visibly existing in an aesthetically pleasing manner. This is not rest. This is performance art. You're assigned to the relaxation gallery, which sounds lovely until you realise it's a curated space designed for 2 things: looking gorgeous and being seen looking gorgeous. You and 24 other concubines lounge on embroidered cushions arranged to maximise profile angles and minimise shadows. There's no slouching. Posture must imply nobility, fertility, and mild but tasteful boredom. You're allowed to choose your activity as long as it's something ornamental. Reading hieroglyphs aloud is too intellectual. Playing a harp is ideal. Smelling flowers while gazing wistfully at a palm tree is encouraged. Anything that gives off divine but available. If you're exceptionally brave, you might practice accidental elegance, like letting your sandal fall off while stretching or sighing thoughtfully, as if pondering the mysteries of love, politics, or your non-existent pension plan. These are carefully rehearsed microdramas designed to be noticed without appearing to want to be noticed. Some of the newer girls try too hard. They strike poses that scream, "Pharaoh, pick me," with the subtlety of a temple gong. These efforts are met with polite applause and immediate whispers. You, however, are experienced. You know the trick isn't to look like you're trying. The trick is to look like you're being effortlessly ethereal while calculating exactly how much effort it's taking. Every once in a while a scribe or messenger walks by. You pretend not to notice. You shift ever so slightly into better light. You are a statue pretending to breathe, a lotus in linen. And if by chance word reaches the pharaoh that the 3rd girl on the left had an air of mystique today, then congratulations, your decorative effort has paid off. You've officially spent 2 hours doing nothing beautifully. And in this palace, that's not laziness, that's strategy. After you've elegantly existed for an hour or 2, posture on point, gaze misty and mysterious, it's time for the educational portion of your day. Don't get too excited. This is not the kind of education that ends in degrees or job offers. This is a concubine school, where the curriculum consists of being interesting enough to hold the pharaoh's attention for 6 minutes, without giving him any dangerous ideas about women being clever. You file into a sunlit chamber where instructors await, draped in scholarly linen and armed with wax tablets. Today's lessons are harp tuning, poetry recitation, and how to tilt your head thoughtfully while discussing dreams. Music is the most respected skill. A concubine who can pluck a harp string just right can practically rearrange court hierarchies. You're taught traditional love songs, all of which include lines like, "My heart blooms like the papyrus reed, and your eyes are more intoxicating than date wine." You're encouraged to mean it, or at least to fake it with appropriate shoulder movement. Poetry follows, not writing it. Heavens no. That's for old men with back problems. You recite it softly with emotional restraint. You practice saying things like, "The moon weeps for my longing," without giggling, even though everyone knows the moon is too busy controlling tides to care about your relationship status. Sometimes a priest teaches you a few basic hieroglyphs. Not too many. Just enough to write, "Pharaoh is radiant like rye," or "I dreamed of lotus blossoms." Anything more complex risks sounding like you have opinions. You're also drilled in mythology, specifically how to compare the pharaoh to various gods without getting the pantheon wrong. Anubis is strength, this is wisdom, Ra is power. Never mix them up unless you want to be remembered as that one girl who called the pharaoh a jackal. At the end of the session you're quizzed, not formally of course, just tested with subtle questions like, if the king asked you, your favourite god, what would you say? Correct answer, whichever one he reminds me of. Your education may not prepare you for the outside world, but if the pharaoh ever asks for a song, a poem, or a well-placed compliment, you'll be ready. Sort of. Now that you've recited enough poetry to qualify as a sentimental statue, it's time for refinement drills. A daily routine designed to make you move like smoke, smile like a goddess, and never, ever trip over your own feet in front of royalty. First up, walking practice. Yes, walking. You'd think you mastered that sometime around age 2, but no, not here. In the harem, walking isn't transportation, it's performance. You're expected to glide across marble as if your feet barely touch the ground. Unfortunately, your sandals are slippery, the floors are polished, and there's always one girl secretly hoping you fall. To help, your instructor hands you a clay jug filled with water and sets it on your head. The goal? Walk the length of the corridor without spilling a drop or developing a lifelong resentment for upper body tension. Every step is a negotiation with gravity and pride. Once you've survived that humiliation, it's time for dance drills. You and the others are arranged in a line and taught to sway like river reeds, but sexier. Arms up, hips loose, but not too loose. You're still supposed to be respectable. You mimic the movements of temple dancers while praying that no one sees your right foot disobey orders. Mistakes are met with constructive criticism. Well, mostly just regular criticism. "You're stiff," says one instructor. "Your rhythm is hesitant," says another. You nod graciously while plotting to stab your own shadow with a hairpin. Then comes the gesture lesson. Concubines don't point, they extend. They don't wave, they fan. Everything must appear effortless, even when your arms have gone numb and your perfume is starting to evaporate. Next, you're reminded of how to kneel with devotion but no desperation. The difference apparently is all in the eyebrow angle. And finally you end with voice training. How to speak softly, seductively, and never too quickly. You practice saying "my lord" 20 different ways, each with a slightly different meaning, ranging from "I am humbled by your greatness" to "please stop breathing near me." You're sweating, you're sore, and you've achieved precisely 0 things of measurable value. But you walk prettier now, which in this palace is everything. Once your daily regimen of balancing, bowing and fake sighing concludes, you return to the common rooms, which function as the ancient Egyptian equivalent of a break room. If that break room were filled with silk-clad women locked in a silent war over eye contact and seating arrangements, and here gossip isn't just a hobby, it's a life skill. In fact, it's arguably the most useful survival tool in the concubine toolkit. Some girls get ahead by dancing, others by smiling. But the truly dangerous ones, they know everything. And more importantly, who else doesn't? You sit near a group of women threading beads. The conversation starts innocently enough. Something about which servant accidentally dropped a fruit bowl in front of the scribe, but within 5 minutes the topic shifts to who got new jewellery, who was seen leaving the astrologer's room with smudged eyeliner, and who's been mysteriously quiet since last week's sandal fitting. Names are never said directly, only implied. The tall one with the heavy perfume, you know, the girl who always looks like she's about to sneeze. Everyone nods. Everyone knows. The senior concubines don't talk much. They listen because real gossip isn't just juicy, it's currency. If you know the pharaoh prefers honeyed wine to date wine, that's leverage. If you know which priest his mother doesn't trust, that's insurance. You contribute carefully, say too little and you're irrelevant. Say too much and suddenly you've accidentally offended Bastet and find yourself demoted to folding ceremonial napkins. Some of the more experienced women even keep coded wax tablets. Not diaries, mind you, but tactical observation logs, a spreadsheet of betrayal, envy, and who coughed during the harp solo. And of course, there's the double gossip. When someone tells you a secret about someone who already told you that same secret, that's when things get interesting. That's when you start playing palace chess. You never gossip directly about the pharaoh. That's suicide. But about the other concubines, it's not just allowed, it's expected. You're doing your civic duty, really. By the end of the hour, you've learned more than in poetry class and you've made eye contact with 3 potential future enemies. Success. After your morning of posturing, powdering and palace espionage, it's time to settle in for the highlight of every concubine's day. The long, suspenseful wait to maybe possibly be summoned by the pharaoh. Now let's be clear, he probably won't come. He's likely busy inspecting irrigation plans, overseeing construction projects, or listening to court musicians with names like Henu the Flatulent. But that doesn't matter, because you still have to act like he might. You're led to the waiting chamber, a gilded room filled with cushions, incense, and women sitting in the same 3 poses. Serene but alluring, restful yet radiant, and desperately pretending not to care. You pick a spot near the window so the natural light hits your cheekbones just right. Not that you've practiced this or anything. A servant enters. All heads subtly turn. Is she here to summon someone? No, she's refilling the fruit bowl. Still, a moment of electric tension passes as you wonder if your great placement was regal enough. You shift positions every 15 minutes, not to get comfortable. Comfort is forbidden. Keep your limbs from going numb in the event you're summoned and expected to glide like moonlight. You also practice looking surprised but grateful in case your name is actually spoken aloud. Some girls hum humbly, others read love poems they wrote themselves, which is both tragic and brave. One girl is quietly plucking at her lute like she's serenading fate itself. You sip wine, pretend not to judge her, and mentally edit her lyrics for better rhyme. Hours pass. A breeze stirs the linen curtains. Somewhere down the corridor a sandal slaps against stone. Everyone freezes. Then silence. False alarm. Someone was just heading to the latrine. You exhale politely. Inside, your soul does a small scream. Eventually, a servant does appear and calls someone else's name. There's a ripple of forced enthusiasm. You smile as if thrilled for her. She floats past, smug and barefoot, smelling like victory and rose oil. You're left with your thoughts, your carefully posed limbs, and the lingering smell of disappointment. He didn't visit today, but he might tomorrow, and so you stay, beautiful, poised, and hopelessly prepared for a man who probably doesn't remember what you sound like. If the pharaoh's harem were a garden, it wouldn't be one of those peaceful lotus ponds poets write about. No, it's more like a perfectly trimmed hedge maze filled with smiling tigers. Every concubine here is sweet, perfumed, and actively plotting. You quickly learn that power here doesn't come from beauty alone. Everyone's beautiful. That's the entry fee. What actually counts? Alliances, influence, and the ability to say, "You look radiant," while thinking, "I hope your eyeliner melts." Some girls form tight little cliques, usually centred around whoever had a confirmed evening audience last week. These groups are part gossip club, part spy network, and part human chess game. Joining one is like marrying into a noble house. You gain protection, status, and lifelong suspicion. Then there are the floaters like you, the quiet observers, the ones who smile at everyone and trust no one. You listen more than you speak. You compliment more than you confess. And you always pretend you didn't hear what you definitely heard. Smiling is your most used tool. There's the polite smile, the supportive smile, the passive-aggressive smile, and the thank you for that completely unnecessary comment smile. You rotate between them like a seasoned diplomat. Some of the senior concubines have mastered what's known as the invisible war, where no insults are ever spoken, but entire careers are ruined through praise that's just a little too specific. Of course she was chosen. The pharaoh always liked women who looked maternal. Occasionally a new girl tries to be sincere. She opens up, shares her past, and asks for advice. This usually ends with her being emotionally flattened by breakfast the next morning. Lesson learned. You discover that maintaining neutral alliances is an art form. Compliment one girl too often and you're her servant. Compliment two and you're a traitor. Compliment none and you're distant. It's best to compliment the cat, honestly. And through it all you smile because smiling hides worry. Smiling buys time. Smiling convinces everyone, including yourself, that you're still in the game. Even if you're just another piece being moved, nothing changes the mood of the harem like the sudden arrival of the great royal wife. A title that means you may all be lovely, but I'm the one whose jewellery gets its own chariot. She doesn't visit often. Frankly, she doesn't have to. Her presence lingers like myrrh and suppressed ambition. But when she does walk in, the room goes from polite rivalry to absolute emotional lockdown in 3 seconds. You don't hear her coming. You feel her like an approaching sandstorm in silk. Conversation evaporates. Figs stop mid-air. Everyone suddenly remembers to cross their ankles, adjust their posture, and pretend to be fascinated by the nearest houseplant. And then she appears. She's older than most of you, which in concubine terms means she's seen a lot. She walks like someone who's been walking past nervous girls in expensive linen for the past 20 years. Her cowl is darker, her headdress taller, her smile a study in regal threat management. She makes slow, deliberate eye contact with each of you. No words, just that faint, amused expression that says, "I know which of you thinks you're clever. I also know which of you cried in the bath last week." She doesn't need to raise her voice. When she speaks, it's usually something terrifyingly vague, like, "I do hope the younger women are behaving with wisdom." No names, no accusations, just enough suggestion to cause a small emotional collapse in 3 corners of the room. You offer your most respectful smile, the one you save for women who could have you reassigned to weaving duty without blinking. She nods slightly. Success. You're for today beneath notice, which is a win. Some girls try to impress her. They perform subtle acts of grace. Retelling a myth, adjusting a flower vase just so, complimenting her choice of anklet like it's a sacred relic. She humours them. She's seen it all because she was you once, but she played the game better and she won. Then, just as suddenly, she leaves, gliding out of the room like a vision in gold. No one breathes for 10 seconds. Then, slowly, conversations resume, softer, more careful. The Queen has walked in and reminded everyone what power really looks like. As the sun sets over the palace walls and casts a golden glow over the Nile, the atmosphere inside the harem shifts. Perfume is reapplied, hair is retied, linen is straightened. Because as darkness creeps in, so does possibility, and with it an elegant form of emotional torment known as maybe tonight. You've spent all day being polished, painted, and perfectly polite. Now you wait again, but this time the stakes feel higher. This isn't about being seen, it's about being chosen. Maybe the pharaoh will send a servant, maybe not. The only certainty is the tension in the air and the faint smell of rose oil and ambition. The younger concubines pretend not to care. They hum softly, rehearse harp melodies, or casually mention they had dreams involving royal cobras and marriage. The older ones, wiser, sharper, simply sit back and sip their wine. They've played this game too long to show their hand now. You, of course, do what all smart women do at dusk in ancient Egypt. You smile vaguely and try not to look like you're rehearsing your surprised but thrilled reaction in your head. The servant enters. Everyone goes still. She clears her throat. Names are never shouted. They're whispered like sacred chants. If it's yours, you rise gracefully, as if the moment hadn't consumed your thoughts all day. If it's not, you keep your face pleasant and sip your wine like it doesn't suddenly taste like despair. Tonight, it's not your name. You nod, smile, and offer an encouraging look to the girl who was called, even as your own confidence quietly crawls under a cushion and weeps. But the show must go on. You remove your jewellery, you unpaint your face, you bathe again, though this time it's more about washing off hope than sweat. You slip into your night linen and curl onto your mat, pretending you're grateful for the quiet. Above you, the moon hangs full and indifferent. Somewhere, music drifts from the upper chambers. You tell yourself, maybe tomorrow, because that's what keeps you here. Not certainty, but the ritual of not knowing. And in this place, uncertainty is the most intoxicating drug of all. As the palace slips into silence and the oil lamps burn low, the harem enters its most secretive and absurd realm. Dream time, where ambitions bloom unchecked and reality politely excuses itself. You lie on your mat, eyes open, staring at the ceiling. The linen above you shifts in the breeze like a lazy ghost. Around you, other concubines murmur quietly, sharing the strange visions they've had lately, walking on lotus petals, pharaohs with lion heads, birds that speak in riddles. It's all very poetic and only mildly insane. But here's the thing. In this palace, dreams matter. A well-timed dream can shift your standing more than all the perfume in Thieves. Interpret the right symbols and suddenly you're not just a concubine. You're a vessel of divine wisdom. Misinterpret them, and you're the girl who claimed Ra wanted her to lead a poetry recital. You keep your own dream journal. It's a cracked papyrus scroll tucked under your mattress. You write things like flooded courtyard, symbolic of emotional repression. Or Pharaoh smiled at me then turned into a fish. Less clear. If you ever find a priest who likes metaphors, this thing could catapult you into real influence, or at least better seating at breakfast. Sometimes dreams are shared strategically. One girl recently dreamt she saw the queen offering her lotus blossoms. Everyone knows it didn't happen, but now she gets invited to the queen's embroidery circle. That's the power of fabricated sleep visions. They're deniable and useful. You dream too. Of rising, of being more than decorative, of having your own estate, of whispering advice to the pharaoh and him actually listening. Occasionally you dream of just leaving, but then you remember. Outside the palace there are fields, sandstorms and husbands who chew with their mouths open. Inside there's at least the illusion of opportunity. You roll over and whisper your latest dream to your friend. It involved a cat walking backward and offering you a crown. She nods like that's perfectly normal, definitely bastard. She says power is coming. You both pretend to believe it because here dreams are currency. Papyrus is cheap, and hope, however delusional, is the only luxury that's free. By your 14th bath and 29th fig, you start wondering what exactly is freedom. It's a word whispered sometimes, not often and never loudly, by the older concubines, usually after too much wine. They'll look off toward the distant hills and mutter things like, "I remember when I could walk to the market alone," or "Once I picked my own hairstyle." And you'll nod respectfully while trying to picture a life where your biggest decision wasn't which incense blend to wear at dusk. On paper, you live in unimaginable luxury. Silk, music, security, and meals that don't involve scraping dates off the ground. But in practice, you have fewer choices than a basket of lentils. Want to leave the palace? That's adorable. You belong to it now. You're technically not a prisoner, but try walking past those guards with your eyeliner slightly smudged and see how far you get. Want to marry? Only if the pharaoh forgets you exist long enough to permit it, which ironically feels less like rejection and more like parole. Want to raise your voice? Only if it's in a love song or a gentle prayer for the Nile to flood favourably. Your job is to be admired, not heard. Your opinions are as ornamental as your bracelets, pretty but strictly non-functional. And yet within this well-stitched cage, some women do find a strange kind of freedom. Not physical freedom, of course, don't be silly, but emotional, political, social freedom. The ability to influence which poem is recited at court, to suggest a priest be consulted, to whisper something to the Queen's cousin that somehow changes the menu for a royal feast. It's not much, but it's something. You think about the village girl you used to be chasing goats, sunburned, covered in dust. She was free in the can go outside sense. Yes, but now you're free in the knows how to manipulate 3 noble families without lifting a finger sense. Is that better? You're not sure. But you do know that freedom here is never given. It's performed like everything else. And the better your performance, the less anyone questions whether you're free at all. One day, you won't be here anymore. Maybe you'll be replaced by someone younger with shinier hair and better loot skills. Maybe the pharaoh will lose interest entirely and take up falconry full time. Or maybe you'll be quietly reassigned to a country villa where you'll spend your days sipping diluted wine and reminiscing about the time you almost got summoned but didn't because the Queen's cousin had a headache. And then comes the real question, the one no one asks out loud. Will anyone remember you? You won't have a statue. Statues are for gods, generals, and men who invented new types of ploughs. Your name might appear in a court ledger somewhere. Line 34. Extra lotus oil for concubine. Name Eliable. That's your grand historical footprint. The scribes won't write songs about you unless you die tragically young and poetically near a fountain. But even then, someone else will probably get the credit. Still, you hope. You hope the Queen remembers you as the one with the steady hands or that girl who never flinched during eyeliner application. You hope one of the younger concubines imitates your posture one day without realizing it. You hope a servant whispers, "She once made the pharaoh laugh like it means something." Maybe that's all legacy really is. A few scattered memories drifting through someone else's afternoon. But on certain nights, especially the ones when the air smells like the moonlight hits the courtyard just right, you let yourself imagine more. Maybe your name will end up in a forgotten scroll. Maybe a modern scholar will read it centuries later and wonder who you were. Maybe they'll mispronounce it, publish a theory, or turn you into an exhibit with poor lighting and a misspelled plaque. Still, it's something because you were here. You outlasted rivals. You mastered posture, deception, poetry, and staying silent in 5 languages. You turned obedience into performance and hope into strategy. You lived in a palace, even if it wasn't really yours, and in a world where most women never left the mud brick walls of their village, you became a whisper in the palace of kings. Maybe that's not immortality, but it's close enough. The feast is over. The music has faded. The nobles have loosened their belts and unfastened their shoes. But for the bride and groom, the most humiliating and crucial part of the day is just beginning. In medieval Europe, marriage wasn't sealed with a kiss. It was sealed with witnesses, sheets, and often a whole room of in-laws. The bedding ceremony, as it was called, was less a celebration of love and more a legal performance, one that turned the bedroom into a courtroom and the bed into the final contract. You see, in the medieval world, sex wasn't just personal, it was political. A noble family needed heirs, and heirs required proof. So after the wedding feast, the entire community, or at least the most nosy and powerful members, would accompany the newlyweds to their chambers, and they wouldn't stop at the door, they'd come in. If you were lucky, they might just remove your shoes, offer a toast, or sing a bawdy song before leaving you to it. If you were less fortunate, they might stick around long enough to see you naked, inspect the bedclothes, or cheer you on with mocking advice and drunken encouragement. Some families even required a bishop or midwife to inspect the bride beforehand, or the sheets afterward for signs that the deed had been done. Why the intrusion? Because marriages weren't private unions. They were public contracts. A noble woman's virginity was political capital. A nobleman's ability to consummate was a legal obligation. Without a consummation, the marriage could be annulled, and without witnesses, it was your word against the world's. It didn't matter if the bride was trembling or the groom was drunk or both were strangers to one another. What mattered was that someone saw or claimed to see the beginning of their conjugal union, and if they didn't, the marriage might not count. In this strange twilight between feast and consummation, the couple's private life began as public spectacle. Their first night together wasn't about intimacy or joy. It was about proof, and often that proof came with an audience. And that, dear viewer, was just the beginning of the ceremony. Once the final toast had been raised and the last course cleared, the newlyweds weren't given privacy. They were given an entourage: servants, family members, priests, and even minstrels formed a procession to escort the couple to their marital bed. And this wasn't some quiet, respectful send-off. It was a rock's theatrical parade, often loud, occasionally lewd, and completely devoid of subtlety. The groom might be half carried, half dragged by his friends, already red in the face from too much wine or dread. The bride, in contrast, was often pale, silent, and escorted by her female relatives, whose job it was to ensure she didn't bolt or faint. If she was a noble woman, this was her debut as property. If she was a peasant, it was still a public performance of modesty and obedience. Either way, it was theatre, and everyone had a role to play. And the music? Oh yes, there was often music. Not sweet romantic violins, mind you. Drums, pipes, and the occasional crude song shouted in rhythm with each step. In France, they called it the charivari, a rowdy, mocking serenade meant to embarrass the couple and encourage a successful union. Think medieval hazing with a religious blessing. Upon reaching the bedchamber, the couple didn't simply step inside and close the door. Instead, they were ceremoniously undressed, often by relatives or attendants. The groom might be stripped down by his groomsmen, the bride, gently or not so gently, disrobed by her maids or matrons. Every layer removed wasn't just fabric, it was symbolic. Childhood gone, autonomy gone. Now you belong to each other, more accurately to the family alliance. In some regions, a priest or bishop gave a final blessing over the bed, as if holiness could somehow sterilize the awkwardness. In others, a cup of wine or spiced milk was passed between the couple, a last comfort before the main act, and the witnesses they might not leave just yet. Some stayed behind the curtain, some stood near the door. A few particularly determined ones waited outside the room with ears pressed to the wood. In short, this was no gentle stroll to privacy. It was a forced march into adulthood, carried on a wave of cheers, songs, and uninvited eyes. And the worst part, the night had only just begun. If you were hoping the crowd would discreetly exit and let the couple awkwardly find their rhythm in peace, think again. In many medieval regions, the concept of privacy during a wedding night was practically non-existent. The entire point of the bedding ceremony was to prove consummation, and in a world where land, power, and alliances were passed down through bloodlines, that proof had to be irrefutable, even if it meant peeking through curtains or literally sitting in the corner of the room. Let's be clear, not all witnesses were intrusive. In some traditions, nobles or village elders might only escort the couple to the bed, remove a shoe, tuck in the covers, say a prayer, and then leave. Symbolic enough to count. But in other cases, the situation took a turn from symbolic to straight-up voyeuristic. Certain royal courts demanded clerics, midwives, or matrons to remain in the room just in case anything went wrong or didn't happen at all. Some nobles even went so far as to appoint official witnesses who would later sign written attestations of consummation. These weren't just casual guests, these were notaries of the night. The implication was clear. You weren't alone, and you weren't allowed to fake it. It gets worse. There are accounts, yes, real ones, of high-born wedding nights where courtiers or family members would listen for specific sounds, watch for movements under the sheets, or even inspect the bed sheets the next morning for signs of deflowering, blood-stained linen, proof of virginity and honour. A clean sheet cause for scandal and annulment, and if the bride was suspected of being less than pure, the pressure doubled.